Hello and welcome to the Christmas week meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville, the last council meeting of the year. And Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets?
Yes, we have regrets this evening from Councillor O'Meara
And Councilor
and
Chisholm?
Councillor Chisholm. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I now invite council and the public to join us in O Canada. Thank you, everybody. Please be seated. 210 years ago, Indigenous people here began welcoming settlers from all over the British Empire. Soon, they were helping slaves escaping from the United States to settle here too. Today, our Indigenous founding partners are still here, enjoying the land with us. They fish and camp under their Treaty 22 rights. Indigenous people in their thousands also live with us as neighbors and friends. Our Indigenous, white, and black settlers created a community with an attractive degree of harmony and prosperity. And in 1857, Ontario gave official recognition of Oakville as a town. At Town Hall, 160 years later, we fly the flag of the Mississaugas of the Credit beside the flags of Oakville, Ontario, and Canada. We fly these flags together to acknowledge our origins. People from all over the world are attracted to the livability we have created. We offer newcomers a warm spirit of welcome. We offer everyone our founding story, so everyone knows what we are part of. We feel sorrow and distress for acts of racism and intolerance suffered across Canada and here at home. We want our future to be equitable and inclusive for all. The path of truth and reconciliation can unite us. Please keep well, stay safe, and let us know of any chance to be helpful to you and yours. Please let us know anytime you can help increase Oakville's harmony, prosperity, and livability. All right, now, Council, I would ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest. And Madam Clerk, I don't see any, and I think I see everybody on these screens here. Council, the minutes before you will contain a correction to the motion on childcare passed at the last meeting. The mover and seconder were listed incorrectly, or at least the seconder was listed incorrectly. And the clerk has acknowledged the error and will be fixing that. So with that, I'm looking for a mover and seconder for the minutes. Councillor Haslett-Thiel and Councillor Palmer, thank you. Any objection to the minutes as described? Madam Clerk, there is none, and the minutes are adopted as described. We have no public presentations, but we do have standing committee reports, quite a few of them, from the Budget Committee, which met on November 16th, November 23rd, November 30th, December 2nd, and December 14th. And before I'd like a mover and seconder for that, but before we vote on it, I'm going to call, so I'll get those mover and seconder. Councillor Duddick and Councillor Giddings, did I see your hand? So thank you very much. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to the chair of that committee, Councillor Adams. Councillor Adams, is this the point where you want to make your presentation?
That would be wonderful. I understand that clerks may have a presentation that they could put up for me and I could speak to it as we go through it. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that at home as well. So on behalf of the Budget Committee, I'd like to share a few words about the recommended 2022 budget. This budget is about being ready for our future, whether it be about being ready to deal with whatever the pandemic throws at us, or about building the community facilities that our community needs, or about the healthy positioning of our finances. I want you to know that we are ready for our future. Next slide. So the recommended budget has an overall property tax increase of 1.50% when you include the town, the regional, and education components. The budget continues the many services that our residents and businesses rely on, while at the same time maintaining Oakville's strong financial position and the maintenance of our high-quality infrastructure. The budget also accommodates the needed new infrastructure to serve residents living in the growing neighborhoods of Oakville. It also responds to the very significant impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, both in terms of its impact on municipal revenues and costs, but also in its support for new programs that are needed and others that need to be adjusted as a result of the pandemic. Next slide. The overall 1.5% property tax increase is made up of a 2.16% Halton region increase, which was passed last week, an expected 0% educational component, and the recommended 1.67% town of Oakville component. And when combined, based on the relative portions of the tax bill, you get the 1.5% overall increase. We target the overall increase because it's what residents see when they pay their bill, and because half of this council also sits on the regional council, which allows us to very effectively manage the overall increase for residents. Next. The 2022 recommended budget exceeds the council guideline of keeping overall tax increases in line with inflation. The recommended overall increase of 1.5% is slightly lower than the inflation expectations for 2022. And while the recent Ontario Consumer Price Index values have been more elevated, I'd say, than the normal 2% level that we're used to, the Bank of Canada forecasts for 2022 and 2023 and the consensus economist forecasts are for the Canadian CPI to return towards 2% in the later part of next year. And I'll remind you that for much of 2020 last year, during our discussion, it was about the risk of deflation rather than inflation. And during the 2021 budget process, I suggested the possibility of higher inflation in the future to you. And well, here we are, and we're seeing that higher inflation. And now I'm suggesting that we'll see the reverse of that in 2022. Next slide. The 2022 recommended budget proposes the lowest increase among our neighbors. In fact, it's at least the 8th straight year that the Budget Committee has recommended to you the lowest increase among our neighbors. These figures are all from the approved budgets for 2022 and are presented on a comparable basis. The higher figures that you see for the other municipalities show the pressures that they're facing as they deal with all of the unfunded infrastructure renewal and construction needs that they have, as well as the impacts of the pandemic on their revenues and operations. So our neighbors are expected to continue to outpace inflation in future years. And Oakville, by contrast, has a well-funded asset management plan that means that we're not in that same situation. I also want to highlight that a number of municipalities have not yet announced their 2022 expectations, and they're only going to approve budgets several months into next year. And so I want to commend our staff and our council for the hard work that's gone into making it possible for us to approve our budget tonight. It's a good governance practice that gives our staff direction regarding the level of resources that they're going to have available to them over the entire year. Next. It's also important to understand our tax increase in the larger context. So since we've switched over to performance-based program-based budgeting and targeted the overall tax increases, this is what we've come to see. Oakville's overall property tax increases have been lower more predictable, and on a downward trend compared to the previous period of time. This consistency is important for our residents, for our businesses, as well as our staff who need to plan projects and services into the future. Next. And so for context, this budget also has both an operating budget and a capital budget. The operating budget is $328 million, as well as the $276 million capital budget that we see here. And so while we plan to raise $221 million in property taxes, the remainder of the operating budget comes from other sources of revenue. And I want residents to understand that not every dollar that we spend at the town of Oakville is coming directly from their property taxes. Next. This was obviously a challenging budget. The town faced the normal impacts of changes to the base operating budget, such as dealing with inflationary increases to utilities, to supplies, to software, as well as salary, wages, and benefit adjustments, all based on contracts and so forth. We also had to manage the ongoing costs of managing new capital projects and the renewal of our capital levy funding for infrastructure renewal. And combined, these are the 4.44% impact for our tax levy at the top. The Budget Committee also worked into the budget the items that were referred to it by Council as noted in the recommendations, which have the impact of 0.26%. Those impacts have been offset by the assessment growth from new development of 1.44% and expected efficiency savings from review work in facilities and recreation. The big story, of course, for 2022 continues to be the ongoing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Staff have handled that expected impact in the budget by first backing out the impacts out of last year's budget and then estimating the impacts for 2022. We estimate the combined impacts of dramatically lower revenue, especially in transit, as well as the increased cost to operate due to the need for things like PPE, for increased cleaning, for changes to operating protocols, is the equivalent of a 2.64% increase to the town levy. It's our expectation that those impacts will be offset by support from the provincial and federal governments. Next slide. So here are those impacts in dollar terms. The largest of the revenue impacts is associated with that dramatic reduction that we expect to see in Oakville Transit ridership and fares. We're optimistic that the offset funding, in particular from the province, will be available to counterbalance those impacts on the revenue and costs. Next. Our capital budget is significantly larger this year than in previous years as we bring forward a number of very important projects for our future. First is funding for the new North Park Community Centre, which when complete will provide community centre service more equally across Oakville. And that's a very important goal for us. Second is the funding for a number of large major transportation projects, including work on 6th Line and Spears Road. And all of these major additional capital projects are funded from development charges, which are paid for by developers. And this includes the costs associated with the debt that's carried by development charges that will in part support the funding of the new community center. Next. And not only are we ready for this year's projects, but we're also ready for our future capital projects. We have $1.6 billion in projects scheduled over the next 10 years. We also have a financing plan to go with them. So we're ready for our future with respect to all of these major projects. Next. Our town reserves remain strong. We'll draw on development charge reserves to fund major projects this year. That's what those funds are intended for. They'll help build the new roads and community centers so that our community is ready for our future. Importantly, our stabilization reserves will continue to surpass the recommended 17% of own source revenue that the GFOA guideline has. And so we'll really be ready as a community if they're needed to respond to the pandemic or other challenges or opportunities as those might happen. Next. Town debt also remains low and tax levy supported debt remains even lower. Debt supported by payments from our taxes is projected to be only $4.5 million at the end of 2022, or just 3.8% of our outstanding debt. The remainder is funded from other sources, with the largest being the town contribution to the new Oakville Hospital, and that's supported, of course, by revenue from Oakville Enterprises Corporation. In the context of the town overall budget, this debt level is very, very supportive. Next. Combined with the regional and provincial shares, the currently forecasted overall increases for 2023 and 2024 will be close to 2.2%. We'll continue to review those impacts, the impacts of the pandemic, and work with our own staff teams and our partners, partner with our colleagues in the other levels of government to keep the future property tax increases in line with inflation. Council directed staff to prepare the 2022 budget while maintaining overall property tax increases in line with inflation, and we're positioned to do the same into the future, as Council has already directed for 2023. And the final slide there, please. So in summary, I'd like to thank all the members of our staff who spent a great deal of time preparing the 2022 budget. In particular, I'd like to thank Jonathan Vanderheiden and Dalibor Stankovici for their work during the process. John has a great team of finance professionals working with him behind the scenes, and they're all the budget managers with each of our program areas. And without them, it would be much harder for us to make good decisions around the funding levels for our various programs. And so I'd like to also recognize Mayor Burton and Councillors Parmar, Knoll, and Giddings for their efforts on the 2022 Budget Committee. I appreciate all of their help and support, as well as all of my other colleagues here on Council. All of you have submitted comments, materials, thoughts, and it's very, very important in terms of recognizing that contribution for your constituents. So, Your Worship, I know you've got a mover and seconder already for the recommendations of the Budget Committee, and so I appreciate that. I always appreciate the support of my colleagues, and so I look forward to having that move forward at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Council, do you have questions for the Budget Chair? Seeing none, may I put the vote? Is there any objection to the motion to approve the budget recommendations? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the motion carries. Congratulations to everyone, and I like your description, Councillor Adams. Ready for our future. That's a good bit of coinage there. Thank you very much for that. Now, Council, if two of you would move and second the necessary resolution, we can resolve into Committee of the Whole for the balance of the meeting. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Grant. Thank you. Any objection? There being none, that carries, and we are now in Committee of the Whole. Council, we have three consent items. The 2022 interim tax levying bylaw, which is a routine matter. The Oakville Galleries agreements, which is, I think, I would submit straightforward. And I hope you'll agree, the confidential consent item, the confidential report from the Office of the Mayor from the CAO Review Committee meeting of December 7th. Could I have a mover for the report, for the consent items? Thank you. Councillor Duddick, thank you. Is there any objection? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, all three consent items are carried. That brings us to the discussion items section. And the very first matter is the verbal COVID update from the CAO. We have 5 listed registered public delegations on this, and I just want to set the table for this by explaining that our bylaw limits delegations to the matter before council. We don't have a come and talk about anything you want type of approach to this. And so I hope the delegations will understand that the information they present should be relevant to what the CAO reports. And if it's outside the jurisdiction of the town, it would be sort of an abusive process. So, Madam Clerk, you're now up. We are all ears, and we're looking forward to your information.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. The Omicron virus or variant of the COVID-19 virus has certainly impacted the number of cases we've seen in the last number of weeks. Last week in Ontario, this same day last week, we had just over 1,500 cases. Today we had just over 3,800 cases, and that's followed by a Sunday at just over 4,100 cases. So you can see the significant increase that we've been experiencing over the last few weeks. Well, we know that the variant is certainly more transmissible, certainly evident by the numbers that are there. The medical experts yet don't have an opinion on whether or not it is really understanding the severity of the variant. Last week at Regional Council, there was an update that was provided by the Public Health And it was an excellent update, and I would suggest anyone who wants to get an update on what is happening with COVID should turn to the region's website in order to look at those two updates. They were excellent. But they also indicated that they've had a 224% increase in Halton over the last 3 weeks. So it is certainly significantly impacting us. Looking forward, the Ontario Science Table had told us last week that based on the modeling that they have, that we could expect anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 cases per day by the end of December, in another 11 days. So the future doesn't look as promising as we would all hope. Over the last week, the province has taken several actions in order to limit the spread. In particular, they've limited the capacity of various businesses to 50%. So that would include businesses such as restaurants and retailers, as well as indoor recreation facilities. They have also dropped the informal outdoor gathering limits from the previous 100 to 25, and for indoor gathering to 10. This certainly creates a different gathering over the holiday season for us all. The federal government is also strongly encouraging that Canadians should not be traveling at this point in time, first of all, for their own safety, and secondly, there may be other safety measures they put in place which would limit perhaps their return. On the vaccine front, the province has increased the eligibility for the booster shot. So as of today, anyone 18 plus is eligible to get the booster shot, even within 3 months or after 3 months of their last dosage. So that has certainly increased the protection to all residents within Ontario. It has been shown that the booster shot is quite effective against the variant. That's what the medical experts are telling us. And it's much more than just the 2 shots that most of us have had already. It raises the importance of all of us booking an appointment for a booster shot as soon as possible. 39% of Halton residents aged 5 to 11 have at least 1 dosage of the vaccination, and that's quite a promising figure given it's only been a few weeks really that's been available. And Halton estimates by the end of December about 50% of those aged 5 to 11 will be vaccinated. 87% of Halton residents 12 years and older have been fully vaccinated with the 2 dosages. With the increased eligibility for the booster shot as well as the shots for the 5 to 11, it is important that people book as soon as possible in order to get those shots. I know in Halton they are backing up into February and March for appointments, so it's essential we get online as soon as possible. Pharmacies are also offering shots as well. In terms of the rapid testing, the province did announce last week that they'd be providing about 2 million testing for rapid testing. There has been quite a demand for these. I understand that the LCBOs were supplied and they've quickly run out of their supply in almost all the locations. They had indicated that the libraries would be provided rapid testings, and that supply has not come through, so you will not find that available at the libraries. In terms of town operations, as always, we respond to what the provincial requirements are. We are not the ones that set those requirements, so we need to respond to the restrictions that they have in place. And of course, the 50% limitation on the indoor recreation space was the one that had an impact on the services we deliver. We did notify all of our user groups on Sunday that requirement was being applied as of Monday. And we are in a bit of a beneficial situation at this point in time because we're moving from our fall programming into our winter programming. So there hasn't been a significant impact on the services we deliver at our recreational center as a result of this new requirement. We are continuing to monitor the situation so that we can respond as provincial requirements affect the services that the town provides. We have limited access to the town hall as of tomorrow. persons who can visit by appointment for specific things that they cannot get online, such as commissioning as of oath, those types of services. There are very few. They can attend with an appointment. All other services are available online, so there's no real need for anyone to be coming into Town Hall. There's, with the changes in the provincial requirements for the 50% limitations and the other gathering spaces, it certainly is going to put a lot more pressure on our municipal enforcement officers who have been out there throughout the pandemic. So that will be certainly a strain on resources going forward, and we'll be looking at that in January as part of the Budget Committee recommendation that you actually have just approved. We will be looking probably at reporting to you soon in the year to see how that is moving along with municipal enforcement. So Council, you have a very dedicated staff team that has been able to transition with all the various twists and turns that have happened throughout this pandemic. And it is really their hard work and dedication that has enabled us to be able to continue to deliver the excellent services to the residents in the community. So in closing, I thought it was appropriate that we end on reminding all of us about all those health requirements. So wearing a mask, a tight-fitting mask is always recommended, maintaining the 2 meters, washing our hands during the holidays, limiting our gathering spaces so that we can keep each other safe, and look to book at a booster shot as soon as possible. Those are all the recommendations that the health officials are letting us know and communicating to us on a regular basis. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam CAO. Council? Councillor Haslett-Deal, and then I think I saw Councillor Grant, Councillor Longo, and Councillor Giddings. All right, I was wrong. Councillor Longo and Councillor Giddings. Councillor Haslett-Deal, you're still up first.
Thank you. Thank you for a fulsome update. Could you just comment on winter recreation plans? So in the budget and the recreation team has been working hard with parks for a plan for this winter. Are any of those programs from early signals at risk based on the news that we've gotten about the virus? So I'm talking about ball hockey on the tennis courts, or pickleball, cross-country trails, the ice skating rinks. Will all those proceed based on the current plan?
Based on the current plan, other than the 50% capacity limits for the indoor spaces, they will proceed. There is, we do need to watch this very carefully just to ensure that if there's a reduction in the indoor skating, that we can pick that up on the outdoor skating side. So that is something we're watching so that we can transition and still keep those services available.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Longo.
Thank you for the update, Jane. Just a quick question. Has there been any guidance on the type of face mask that employees are supposed to be wearing, going from kind of a cloth to a level 2 or level 3? And does the town actually provide any face masks to any of the employees, or does everyone have to bring their own?
No, we provide face masks. We apply the 3-ply face mask to all employees, at least 1, if not 2 or 3. We are actually looking at distributing some more masks. It's been a while since they were out, just to make sure that they are fresh and clean. We also are following very closely the recommendations that are coming out of the federal government in terms of the advice to see whether or not we should be looking at other mechanisms for masking, such as a double masking with a surgical mask or other types of ways in order to make sure that we provided the most protection. We have recently sent out communications to staff to, one, make sure they wear their masks at pretty well all times, unless they're in their own office, and also to make sure it's tight-fitting, which we've heard most recently is very important so that the mask actually can do the job it's supposed to be doing. So it is something we're continuing looking at. We had a good discussion actually this morning on that particular topic to see where we need to go, if necessary, on the masking.
And I just want to reiterate again to thank the town employees and management for the ability to pivot so quickly and quite frequently, as we've been going through this. So, you know, I think we as council appreciate that, but also the residents and those who visit the town. So thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, CA Closey, thank you very much. We had a lot of positive feedback regarding the outdoor programs that are being put in place. And so a lot of good news on that front. Do we have any limits that we have to develop for the outdoor rinks? You mentioned earlier that the only concerns at this point were indoor, as directed by the province. Do we have anything for outside capacities?
So the province also reduced the capacity limits for outdoor spaces, informal outdoor spaces, to the 25. So I'd actually refer to Colleen to see what implications on any of our outdoor services. Colleen?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, there are some limitations. We are posting signage so that our residents know exactly what the capacities are at any given point. We are anticipating that there probably will be changes as we progress through the holiday season and beyond, but it's currently at 50%.
So similar to last year where we had to remove 6 pucks and nets during certain times, we can expect that may occur as well?
I would anticipate that's exactly what's going to happen. So we've already reviewed all of our procedures from the previous winter and are dusting them off in anticipation of sudden announcements.
All right, and so there are different sized rinks being put up across the town. Is it based on square footage? So staff will have a look at the dimensions and divide it out and post a sign at that point?
That's exactly right.
Thanks so much.
All right, Council, I don't see any more questions, so I think it's time to turn the floor over to our registered delegations from the public. Madam Clerk, would you call the first delegation?
The first delegation listed is Lynette Horton.
Ms. Horton, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Mayor Burton and councilors, can you hear me okay?
We can see and hear you very well, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. My name is Lynette Horton, and I'm a 16-year resident of Oakville in Ward 5. And I'm here to speak to you today to share my deep concerns with the ongoing efforts of the public health response to managing COVID-19 pandemic, and specifically around the policies that have been put in place by council. I'm also deeply concerned about the lack of public debate or widespread consultation with residents on policies that fundamentally change the way we live our lives and restrict access to basic services in our town, province, and country. I'd like to assert that when restrictions are put in place and liberties are taken away from citizens, there must be overwhelming evidence that this is necessary, a clear goal set, and a commitment to consider all possible options to mitigate harms against citizens. Of even greater concern is the harm being inflicted on our youth. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, anti-science, anti-public health, or potentially the wingnut I heard earlier on the call, that the famous names that people are being called. But I have simply examined the evidence being passed off as evidence by public officials, and it simply doesn't make sense to me to justify the current response. What I'm actually hoping you're here to do, and it's clear by listening to the early conversation, is that you have an open mind, ready to listen to our concerns without judgment, but rather a sense of genuine interest and curiosity, seeking to understand and consider the arguments and information being provided. In preparation for today, I took the time to review the COVID updates from previous council meetings, and I've made several observations that I'd like to share over the next 10 minutes. I do want to put one thing into perspective. COVID-19 has a 99% survival rate for the majority of the population. Illness severity and death rates are hugely age stratified, and ensure our youth are not at any significant risk that would justify restrictions or prevent them participating fully in society. Let's discuss what appears to be the singular focus today on testing, cases, and vaccination. Just last week, all school students were sent home with the rapid tests, and Oakville leaders, I heard it earlier, enthusiastically directing residents to rush out to store locations and pick up rapid tests, even at your local LCBO. Of course, the instructions are only to test if you're asymptomatic. And I'll say that again, test if you're healthy and asymptomatic. And let's not forget the glaring contradiction on the role of rapid testing with regards to the vaccination policy implemented by town for the employees. Unless there's an update that I'm not aware of, Town of Oakville has not amended its current vaccination policy to be inclusive of personal circumstances to allow for choice by their employees, or to use an ongoing testing regime as an alternative to the COVID shot to maintain meaningful employment with the town. Nor has the town allowed this viable option for our youth and residents to access recreational facilities and activities. And what about exemptions? Exemptions have been so narrowly defined that even doctors are not allowed to give medical exemptions for the immunocompromised. I've not seen any definitive research that would prevent exemption based on previous infection. In fact, there are over 20 peer-reviewed studies that show natural immunity is more robust and longer lasting than vax-based immunity. And that is for the Omicron as well. Again, this has not been made available for your employees, youth, or the rest of the residents. On the vax mandates and passes, I'm still trying to understand why council would be so enthusiastic to support such a restrictive mandate in September. I did notice 3 councillors had a moment of pause regarding the lack of consultation, insufficient details, but we passed it anyway. I saw no real consideration or empathy for the legitimate concerns raised by the town employees with regards to the workplace mandates or for the recreational and cultural restrictions for the unvaccinated youth. Taking away livelihoods, taking away key services, and it wasn't even debated. No interest in the side effects of being coerced into a medical treatment that you don't potentially want or need. In fact, on the meeting I watched, council was proud at the time to impose even stricter mandates in the province, keeping children away from sports and other activities that we know are crucial to child development. What really astounds me, though, are the so-called champions of diversity, equity, inclusion, disadvantaged citizens, who then support the implementation of COVID-related policies and mandates that do the exact opposite. Let's go a little bit deeper into the concerns. I have written many letters and engaged with many public officials over the last 20 months. I want to share with you a response as a concerned citizen from one of the members of council. And I quote, "While I understand you want to express your point of view and attempt to persuade me to champion your position at council, I can assure you that this is simply not going to happen. My votes have been without reservation, made with the best information available and the best interests of our community and its citizens. I'm not one of them." It went on to say that my concerns were not based on any expert advice and guidance from public health officials. And only if public health was to rescind the vaccination policy would they consider any change of heart. I think I was being accused of having a biased and incomplete narrative. Of course, without any recognition that that was exactly what I was trying to challenge. If you do not deliberately bring in an opposing view, you create the conditions for confirmation bias that can result in very poor decision-making. Let me explain what I was trying to encourage. First, a debate, and by definition, which is an exchange of oppositional arguments. I sent many requests over the last several months for an open dialogue and debate, all of them turned down to various leaders. Reviewing the previous COVID updates, and given that residents such as myself have raised several safety concerns, I was very surprised to see from the Chief Administration Officer's update, and that's similar to today, that there's no reference to any monthly safety report, not one. Not one question regarding the safety of vaccinations, not one question around what's happening with the citizens regarding the restrictions, not one. Yet safety first was often referenced in a number of presentations that have been before council. Let's go back to September when you approved the Town of Oakville vaccination policy. And this is when Dr. Moore announced that the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine would be, and I quote, "de-recommended for young Ontarians aged 18 to 24, and especially young males because of the evidence of the increased vaccine-related myocarditis risk for this demographic." And I want to go to a column written by Irvin Student because I think he says it really well, and it speaks to the unwarranted exclusion of the unvaccinated youth from the sport. And I quote, "A week before his modernity recommendation, Dr. Moore and most of the Ontario officers of medical health had already begun explicitly and aggressively linking basic access to sport recreation participation in facilities on the fact of vaccination for youngsters over the age of 12. A teenager could happily play hockey, soccer, or basketball in the province's clubs or municipal facilities only if he or she were vaccinated. If not, they were on the street. And so thousands of regular Ontario kids are now indeed on the street out of sport. And because Dr. Moore has boxed them into an impossible, once inconceivable and entirely un-Canadian choice, assume the risk, however small or less small, of myocarditis, which is often life-changing, or be left without sport altogether. The teenager who vaccinates without injury gets to play volleyball. He or she who vaccinates with injury is, in Moore's logic, a loser in luck. No one mentions him or her if he or she exists at all. Another question that goes unanswered for 12 months, and I've gone to my MP, MPP, and public health for this several times, is why we're not talking about preventative actions and early treatment options for those that need an alternative to vaccination, would like to exercise their right to bodily autonomy, and or are at the highest risk to experience severe illness, vaccinated or not. One example is the monoclonal antibodies, where the clinical trial data shows that the use of the antibody treatment can reduce COVID-19 hospitalization death in high-risk groups by 70%. 70%. No questions that I've seen in council at this time. I want to emphasize as well, and I'm not saying it was completely what was happening, but the repeated use of aggressive and frightening language and tone when referring to those that have chosen not to receive COVID-19 vaccines or to ask questions regarding restrictions, that is coming from or tolerated by our political leaders, public health and council members, is deeply concerning. In any other context, this language would be considered hate speech and is being used to create a division and justify discrimination and segregation, all while legitimizing medical coercion. Let me again focus on the youth for a moment. Our youth cannot be shields for continued adult fear. This is a serious ethical problem in forcing vaccination on healthy children with the hypothetical goal of benefiting another segment of the population. I'm not sure how you would describe society today. I heard all about the numbers and the cases. We're definitely focused on that. We have 95%, maybe that number's wrong, someone can correct me, of the high-risk Ontarians, those over 70, fully vaccinated. We have a medically segregated society, censorship of opposing views, constant character attacks, too busy counselors to deal with their constituents, destroyed small businesses, loss of livelihood over private health information, suicide and addiction at all-time highs, and restricted access to education and suffering for our youth. Not thriving, in my view. I ask council to look at your current policies through a critical lens and evaluate them on broad health, economic, and ethical indicators. Do not hide behind blanket statements for the greater good that clearly cannot be justified. And I'll leave you with a final quote by H.L. Mencken. Morality is doing what is right, regardless of what you are told. Obedience is doing what you're told, regardless of what is right. I challenge you to err on the side of morality instead of obedience. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions or points of clarification.
Thank you for your information. I appreciate that it's been difficult to find a platform in which you can express the range of concerns that you expressed, most of which, frankly, are not decisions that we get to make here at Council. Dr. Moore, for example, doesn't work for us, and for that matter, public health is at a higher level of government than we are as well. Council, do you have any questions for Ms. Horton? Ms. Horton, thank you very much for your time and your information. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Martha Laverde.
Ms. Laverde, welcome. Council looks forward to your information. Is she there? actually.
Unmute. Okay. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you very well, thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Burton and councillors. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight to you. I am a resident of Oakville for the past 20 years. And definitely I appreciate the good quality of life that we have enjoyed in this town. So the reason why I think it's important to review this presentation is because not only it's Canadian, it pertains exclusively to Ontario. And I'm going to ask the clerk if she can move to the next screen, please. The work that I'm going to present has been done by the Canadian Immunization Research Network through a grant, and it also has the backup of the Ontario Ministry of Health. There's a link there where all the details will be found. Next screen. The vaccines remain one of the most important public health tools we have to fight disease. Preventive vaccines have led to the eradication of deadly diseases such as smallpox and are close to erasing polio from the world. The human papillomavirus vaccine prevents cervical cancer and is showing promise for some types of oral cancer. The types of vaccines that the government of Canada has approved for COVID-19 are not the traditional type. The approved Pfizer and Moderna, as we know, are mRNA vaccines. This is a new experiment. These have been approved in an extraordinarily short period of time, and both reduce risk of severity of the illness, but do not prevent the illness nor the transmission. They present safety issues that have been studied. One of the issues has been increased rates of myocarditis and pericarditis. Little data is available regarding the new Omicron or any other impact, but the objective tonight is that this study will be able to estimate the reporting rates of myocarditis and pericarditis following the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine by product, sex, age, and dose number, as well as dose interval. Next, please. The participants in this report have reported episodes of myocarditis, pericarditis following COVID-19 vaccine in the study period, which is last year, and up to only 3 weeks ago. Researchers obtain information on all doses administered in the province to calculate reporting rates. What we see in this too is that Moderna and Pfizer both have affected the heart, but mainly, if you're going to see the tables ahead, it has been Moderna, and also it has been the use of both Moderna and Pfizer. The main outcomes and measures reported rate of myocarditis and pericarditis meeting the level of 1 to 3 of the Brighton collaboration case definitions. Myocarditis or inflammatory cardiomyopathy is inflammation of the heart muscle, as we all know. This life-threatening condition may progress slowly or quickly and can result in cardiac arrest because of inflammation limits the heart's ability to pump blood sufficiently. The human and economic cost of treatment is very high. This is part of what you directly don't have any access to, maybe, but we all need to be aware that this condition limits an individual capacity to work, to be productive, and to contribute to society. The treatment would imply very specialized health professionals adding to the burden presently on our health system. These results of the vaccines were administered, and there were a total of almost 20 million doses. And out of that, 297 reports of myocarditis and pericarditis meeting in our inclusion criteria. Among these, 69% occurred following the second dose of COVID-19 mRNA vaccine, and 76% occurred in males. We don't have stats of the boosters, but it seems that boosters are going to accelerate this figures. The median age of individuals with a reported event was 24 years. The highest reporting rate of myocarditis and pericarditis was observed in males aged 18 to 24 years, following mRNA 1237, which is the one from Moderna. Next, in these tables, you will see in the totals of the 297 cases that the impact has been made in a main way, 96 or 32% in the age of 18 to 24 years. After the second dose, there has been an increase in those side effects. For those who like charts, you can see all the patients and the emergency visits and the intensive care unit admissions. Next, please. This chart is myocarditis and pericarditis per million doses of vaccine product. So again, after the second dose, look at the charts of those in the ages of 12 to 17 and then 18 to 24 years. Definitely between the two, it's over 60% impact. Down here, the mRNA, which is the Moderna, in the age of 18 to 24 years, it has been 195 after the second dose, and then 58.7 after the second dose in males from 25 to 39 years of age. Can we check the next one, please? So the expected episodes of myocarditis and pericarditis post second dose of Covet after June 1, 2021. These are very updated just to this month figures. So here are by doses and Pfizer's and Moderna. The next screen, please. The conclusions and relevance of the safety study in the heart effects. Our results suggest that vaccine product, interdose interval, and vaccine schedule combinations may play a role in the risk of myocarditis and pericarditis, in addition to age and sex. Certain programmatic strategies could reduce the risk of myocarditis following mRNA vaccines. Therefore, the idea that one solution fits all definitely must not be applied, particularly when it comes to reducing the period between the first and the second dose. Next one, please.
Ms. Laverde, you have less than a minute left. I would suggest that you should wind up.
Okay. Okay, I just want to leave you with the following. If any of you have children around in the ages from 2 to 11 years of age or 5 to 11 years of age, just think of the impact that these decisions regarding vaccinating everybody would have in the life of these children. Just think how bad it would be to have a heart condition and how much would be the impact for family, for society, and our health system. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, by all means.
Thank you very much for taking the time to share this information with us. I know it's hard to find a platform. This is information that I'm aware that Public Health at Ontario has already considered and has in fact changed their program to reflect the one solution doesn't fit all. So I hope you can get some comfort from that. Council, do you have any questions for the delegation? Ms. Laverde, thank you very much for your time and information. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
Yes, the next delegation is Chad Horton.
Mr. Horton, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'd like to start with a quote, if I may. Individual rights are not subject to a public vote. A majority has no right to vote away the rights of a minority. The political function of rights is precisely to protect minorities from oppression by majorities, and the smallest minority on earth is the individual. That's Ayn Rand. I was originally going to speak to you this evening regarding the futility of wearing masks and show that its only purpose was political theater. I was prepared to cite multiple peer-reviewed studies and conducted all over the world about the ineffectiveness of wearing them and try to convince you that sole purpose is really only to remind the serfs at large who really is their master. After watching previous council sessions and observing the lackluster reception by councillors from previous delegates' input, it was clear to me that I'd just be wasting my time, as facts and figures and efficacy on the impacts of current public health measures seem not to interest anyone anyway. If anything, it would only spur on an already high level of perceived contempt that some councillors already had difficulty in hiding. So instead, I'd like to draw your attention to the psychological battle that we have on our hands that is being created solely by all levels of government and perpetuated endlessly by government's propaganda of one-size-fits-all cure to the pandemic. As important as facts and figures are, if this was all that mattered, the pandemic would have been over long ago. By almost any metric, the numbers indicate to us something far different than what we are being told. Instead, we have been fed a steady diet of ad campaigns to constantly scare us and remind us that we are in a pandemic, something for which would otherwise be self-evident and you would think we wouldn't have to be reminded of. I have to believe that you're all smart individuals in your own right, but to never question the narrative that you are creating and promoting from all levels of government is shocking. Fear has been the only tool that government has been interested in promoting. Town council has bought into this narrative hook, line, and sinker. At almost every turn throughout the last 2 years, we have been lied to by our governments and made would-be conspiracy theorists look like prognosticators. First, it was the great lie regarding mask wearing. Doctors Fauci and Tam both admitted that it was ineffective and not necessary as the virus could infiltrate them anyway. Then after some time, there was a complete 180-degree turn on that statement. It was completely over-vectored to the worldwide mandates we have in existence today, barring a few places like Florida, Sweden, Texas, and a few others. That was, of course, explained away because it was a good lie. And of course, the general public accepted this with little pushback. Town council, again, is in full support of this policy by extending their mandates with no public consultation unless I missed the debate. The next was massive worldwide lockdowns that we were told would stop the spread. This too was ineffective and did nothing to slow the spread. There are, of course, the usual suspects that did not lock down, and their numbers are no better, no worse in managing the spread and ill effects of COVID than those who did. Here, we are once more involved in the lockdown narrative, and it's rearing its head again as capacity limits are reimposed on businesses throughout Ontario. Again, Town Council seems to be on board with this as well. There are many more inconsistencies, but none more invasive and troubling than vaccination mandates, for which this council is completely culpable in enforcing and was evidenced by your unanimous vote to implement them at your council meeting in September for city staff. This overreach is from every level of government is so shocking and so wrong on so many levels. It's bewildering to try to comprehend that this is actually taking place in our democracy. Morally, ethically, and practically, it's flawed throughout. and the levels of division that it's creating throughout society is staggering. You are all responsible for the ill effects that this will have on those who choose not to get the shot. Holding a person's employment and livelihood at ransom is coercion and is by the very definition immoral and unethical. But you don't stop there. You're barring children from taking part in sports and all other activities if they don't have the shot. You're actively sowing divide in society and making it normal to discriminate against these individuals. All we have ever learned and been told is that discrimination is abhorrent and wrong, and rightly so, I might add. But yet we're living right here in the present with government leaders and bureaucrats actively fueling this division. We have all seen the lawn signs that every child matters and hate has no place here. What they all seem to be missing is the additional line, unless you're not vaccinated. From a practical standpoint, giving the shot to the entire population only drives creation of further variants. This in turn spawns government and media to ramp up the fear narrative once again. I bring this to your attention and ask you why. Why would you discriminate, segregate, and bar people from work, gatherings, sports venues, restaurants, etc., when it is common knowledge now that in spite of the rhetoric, getting the shot does not guard against infection or transmission, as per the CDC? We were told that it was protect others. Now that it doesn't do that exactly, why do you not ask why? Since when do I put something in my body, which it is still experimental, I might add, to protect someone else? If I refuse to do so, and that makes me selfish in anyone's eyes, so be it. Getting a vaccination is to protect the individual, not someone else. Even though the definition has been changed to suit the narrative, this simply cannot be accepted. I couldn't have said it any better myself, so I'll draw from an open letter to the Ontario Attorney General's office by an unnamed employee, and in it they say that the Canadian Bill of Rights protects our fundamental rights and freedoms as Canadians. Our rights and freedoms are inalienable and cannot simply be removed by some policy because someone in high office said so. The vax mandates policies that they do not hold any such authority. Instead, it breaks established laws. It infringes upon individuals and group freedoms, and that perpetuates a state of terror in the hearts and minds of its victims. The political gangsterism that's involved here in the name of public health cannot be permitted to take place in our free and open society. The numbers of vaccine-caused deaths and serious injuries are in the hundreds of thousands around the world. How can a reasonable, level-headed person or authority recommend such treatment, let alone enforce it, and let alone make it a condition of employment and access to public services? Analysis of the data by well-known reporting systems such as VAERS indicates that as of November the 12th of this year, 894,000 adverse events have been reported and more than 18,800 deaths, with thousands requiring urgent care and hospitalization. And in my small network of friends and family, I know of too many. Elevated adverse events and deaths have become so noteworthy in Ontario that it prompted Ontario MPP Randy Hilliard to formally write to the OPP Commissioner to open a criminal investigation into the public issue. Public Health, as of November 14th, reported 537 cases of myocarditis and thousands of adverse events following immunization in their report. There is surmountable evidence that this so-called benefit of COVID inoculation are highly contestable at best and tortuously lethal at worst. One finds it horrifying to think that these potions are being injected into our children, with this council and all governments cheering it all the way. We're intelligent, free-thinking individuals. We must not be made victims of collectivist ideology designed to achieve the goals of the few while obliterating the freedoms of so many. History has shown that dehumanization is the first step in perpetuating crimes against humanity. Gulags and gas chambers just didn't appear overnight. It took a steady campaign of division and hate to build them. The vax policies that are being mandated today seek to dehumanize Canadians and effectively placing them into an us versus them group where the complicit us enjoy all the rights. Meanwhile, them and those people, as our remedial prime minister likes to call them, are ridiculed and written off the books as societal undesirables and receive all the scoffs society can muster up. By implementing and enforcing the unlawful vax policy, you're helping create a tiered society of subhuman and forced conformists, divided along dictatorial pharmaceutical lines. It's easy to place labels on groups, sentencing them to a gloomy fate. It takes moral courage and leadership from you all to recognize the wrongdoing and call it out for what it is. I find it ironic that the city, who is there to look after the best interests of its residents, is now busy rolling out and purging the fundamental rights of the same residents. Upstanding citizens are now being vilified and discriminated for being rational, responsible humans and for defending Canadian rights. The cries of my body and my choice have been conveniently forgotten. When lies are told over truth and told wholesale with such frequency and conviction by so many, not the least of which by you, our local government, the truth becomes murky to the point that it ceases to be identifiable from falsehood. The line between truth and misinformation these days is being muddied as only one narrative sees the light of day, as governments own the loudspeaker and have the most money to proclaim the official narrative. And I'll close by asking, maybe if council has any, if you're looking for recommendations, I'd offer these. One, make the shot available to whoever wants it, whether it's 2, 3, 4, or 10 shots if they so choose. Otherwise, end the mandates. Let kids play sports and mom and dad put food on the table. The last one, end all other mandates that are in your specific purview to do so. Stand up to the ones that you know are wrong, and leave the rest of us law-abiding citizens to go about our lives unimpeded like it used to be prior to COVID. Keeping this in mind, a few statistics that every decision maker needs to remember when it comes to infringing on our inalienable right. Over 80% of COVID deaths in Ontario occurred in long-term homes, and the vast majority, over 99% of the people who contract it, will fully recover. Help and mitigate where it's needed, and let the rest of us live, not merely exist. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your advice. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Joan Pinto.
Ms. Pinto, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening.
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council, and those joining us on the call. I don't see my slides yet. Thank you for this opportunity to present our views at this public meeting. Let me introduce myself. My name is Joan Pinto, and I have called Oakville home for the last 22 years, 17 of which have been in Ward 4. I love Oakville, our town, our community, and it has pained me to watch Oakville's draconian response over the last 19 to 20 months to a virus with a survival rate of about 99% for the majority of the population, and which poses stratified risk across all age groups. Stratified meaning children are at statistically insignificant risk from the virus, while our elderly, those 80 plus, are at a higher risk. Oakville's response, which for the most part mimics diktats from Public Health Ontario and an increasingly tyrannical federal government, has had far-reaching negative consequences and detrimental effects on our community and Canadians as a whole. It is shocking to note that, as Lynette pointed out, Oakville's response has sometimes been unnecessarily harsher. As members of council responsible for the health and well-being of our town, it is morally imperative that you weigh collectively these harms that far outweigh the benefits. Let's stay on the slide actually. To note some of the harms: diminished mental and physical health, financial despair of small business owners, evaporating financial wealth of everyone not in the top 10%, decline in children's education and social development, firing of initial heroes of the pandemic, healthcare workers and teachers at school, for those not being compliant, unbridled 20-year high inflation that is eroding the value of everyone's savings. Actions have consequences. While restrictions have eroded our way of life and freedoms, your one-size-fits-all solution is being forced on everyone, on healthy people with God-given natural immunity who are at very low to zero risk from the virus, on children who were never at risk from the virus, on those who are at a greater risk of being harmed by your solution. So permit me over the next few minutes to throw some light on the so-called solution that you and our governments have been trafficking around the clock, forcing by all means foul, not fair. For the rest of my presentation, I will be calling these mRNA injections not vaccines. Why? Let's look historically at the definition of vaccines. Pre-2015, vaccines in their true sense had a neutralizing or sterilizing effect. they were injections that killed or weakened infectious organisms that attacked us, and they prevented disease. Those three things are very important. They killed or weakened infectious organisms that attacked us, and they prevented disease. Somewhere down the line, the definition of vaccines was altered to only induce immunity. And in September 2021, when the so-called mRNA injections failed to prevent infection or induce immunity, the CDC quietly changed the definition yet again. Next slide, please. Let me quote from the Lancet study. In a year-long study of 621 people in the UK with mild COVID-19 symptoms, scientists found that their peak viral load was similar regardless of injection status. What do I mean by this? The injections are leaky, to put it bluntly. We've seen this repeatedly played out when the NHL teams had virus outbreaks. And you can see I've dropped in all the links. I would urge you to look at those articles. The Atlantic was one of the first publications that was bold enough to concede this evident truth that mRNA injections transmit COVID-19 virus. So if these mRNA injections transmit the virus, what is the purpose of injection mandates and passports? Next slide, please. The media narrative over recent months, and more disturbingly from Public Health Ontario, which you defer to all the time, is that increasing cases are predominantly being driven by the uninjected. This chart shows injection status as a percent of daily new cases. The green line represents those with 2 doses of mRNA injections. The red line is those not injected. What former lawyer, current Ontario Health Minister Christine Elliott is forgetting to mention in her daily tweets is that cases from kids aged 0 to 11 are quietly being included in daily uninjected case totals. This is creating a dangerous distortion between Canadian media's narrative of the uninjected and what reality really is. So let's see what reality is. Next slide, please. If uninjected kids are removed from the red line, we get a true picture of those that are uninjected that form merely 13.4% of daily new cases and not 30% that Ontario has been pushing in front of us. The injected cases, on the other hand, now represent the highest proportion of daily new cases. Your so-called vaccinated, 65.3%, while continuing to trend upwards daily. So if these mRNA injections, I ask you again, don't prevent getting you infected with the virus, what is the purpose of injection mandates and passports? Next slide, please. What this does spell is waning immunity. And almost everyone, funny enough, including CNN, has had to accept the black and white writing on the wall. I've given you links there. The data can't be denied or manipulated anymore. The studies and media coverage of waning immunity of mRNA injections is in. The fact that Ontario is lining up sheep for their 3rd booster is evidence of waning immunity. And I ask you again, so if these mRNA injections don't prevent infection from the virus after a few months, what is the purpose of injection mandates and passports? Next slide, please. But what has shocked me the most of a developed country like Canada is its denial of God-given natural immunity. Again, I've listed a few studies that I urge you to check out. An Israeli study was the first and largest of its kind to directly compare protection against infection conferred through previous infection, natural immunity, versus mRNA injections. And it concluded that natural immunity provides a more robust, longer-lasting immunity than injections by a factor of up to 13 times. Without going into any detail, let me abbreviate for you a stunning stat that I found in a scientific American journal on natural immunity from way back in 1993 when I did a project in university on James Watson and Francis Crick. Our creator has designed the human genome with 1,920,000 antibody genes. I'll let that number sink in for a second. Unvaccinated Canadians who have recovered from COVID have robust antibodies that are scientifically proven to provide better protection against waning RNA injections are still forbidden by the Government of Canada from stimulating the economy by spending money in restaurants, bars, gyms, theaters, sports games, and other communal indoor spaces, or traveling on trains or planes as natural immunity is not recognized in Canada. Apparently, science is not recognized in Canada either. The only thing Ontario leads the world in is total days of lockdown. I hope we're very proud of that. Next slide, please. The next two slides go hand in hand. I'll try to do them quickly. They show a comparison and alternatives to lockdown, to restrictions, to injection passports. Compare Sweden's response with Ontario, and let's see which has been more effective. Yes, Sweden has a higher death rate in the 80+ age group. That is because the virus initially raged in long-term care homes, and really we know that happened in Ontario and New York State as well. However, Sweden stayed the course. Ontario's average death rate is significantly higher than Sweden's, 1.56% versus 1.22, and is higher in every other age group. Except for their rocky start, it can be argued that Sweden has had the best pandemic response in the world. Why do I say that? Next slide, please. Sweden never locked down, nor did schools or businesses ever close. Instead, everyone was living their lives as they always had. They took precautions while understanding their individual risks by doing so. Sweden's strategy should continue to pay future dividends, as 12% of their population have contracted COVID, whereas in Ontario, less than 5% has contracted COVID, and we continue to remain holed up, denying a healthy population a chance of natural immunity, which excess deaths for those under the age of 45, partially explained by increased overdoses and other deaths of despair during our lockdowns. Next slide, please. I implore Council to carefully assess the data. The data does not lie, as hard as the science table and media has tried to distort the facts. You do have the capacity to stop societal segregation and discrimination based on medical choices. Don't let your policies divide us. Acknowledge God-given natural immunity, embrace our kids, don't inject them for no reason. And as Martha and Chad pointed out, let's not expose our precious children to more harm than good. Let's be bold and offer early treatment options. And by the way, I urge you to read the book, The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert Kennedy Jr., detailing effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin as therapeutics. And the last thing I want to say is the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, quoting FDR. Will you be bold and lead the way to effect change right here in our beloved town of Oakville? Please do. History will remember you.
Ms. Pinto, thank you very much for your advice. I understand that it might be hard to get a platform from which you can offer your medical advice to the doctors at Ontario Public Health. And I doubt very much that they will see this meeting. But we did want you to have the opportunity to express your views. And I'll now ask if council have any questions. Ms. Pinto, thank you very much for your time and your information. Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Donald Welsh.
Mr. Welsh, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Hello?
Hello, we hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to address the council. My name is Dr. Donald Welsh, and I'm a member of the Robarts Research Institute and a professor of physiology at the University of Western Ontario. My specialization is cardiovascular biology. I've published over 90 peer-reviewed manuscripts. I hold 4 federally funded grants, and I'm currently the Rohrbeck Chair in Vascular Biology and Neuroscience. What I'd like to do today is just take a very small portion of your time and provide background on respiratory biology, and so that you as policymakers can make sound decisions as to childhood participation in recreational events. So I'd like to start with just a little bit of basic physiology. So the lungs are responsible for oxygen exchange, and for this process to occur, blood must come into contact with the air. So respiratory viruses, and believe it or not, there's about 200 in free circulation, can often lodge themselves in the airways and the lung, initiate an infection, and this interferes with gas exchange. In a small number of cases, particularly in the old and the frail, this infection can spread to the body, and it leads to serious life-threatening condition. Now, it may surprise you, but viral infection happens 24/7, 365. You barely notice because viruses are being quickly neutralized by your lungs' innate immune system. So the severity of a respiratory viral infection is age and risk stratified. And consequently, it is normal for vaccines to be deployed in an age and risk stratified manner. So think of the flu shot. This is consistent with the principles of what we call precision medicine. Please note that respiratory vaccines aren't true sterilizing vaccines. A sterilizing vaccine will block the initial infection, the disease itself, and then its transmission. Respiratory vaccines are best viewed as what we call time-limited therapeutics, okay? And there's a significant difference here. And they are using the immune system to moderate disease. So they're trying to attenuate severe outcome. Because of this, they are often termed what we call leaky vaccine. And they shouldn't be considered a magic universal cure-all, as they all come with risks, and these risks need to be balanced. So COV-2 is a new coronavirus strain which follows the same risk stratified pattern, and even more so than usual. This has been known from the very beginning, and it was actually first picked up by actuarials, the people that set your insurance rate. Note that those rates have not risen during the epidemic, and that's because, according to them, nothing unusual is happening. But what's really going on here is we're simply substituting one respiratory virus for another. Such decisions are robustly backed by scientific data, both international and Canadian, and which amply notes that pre-existing co-immunity and the development of durable immunity upon COV-2 infection. So children and young adults are of exceedingly low risk of hospitalization and disease. In the age range of 5 to 11, we describe it as statistically zero. They are also poor transmitters of disease as acknowledged in the literature. So this brings me, I think, to my main point today, which is youth vaccination, in particular in the 5 to 11 age range with the new generation of COV-2 vaccines. Given their statistically zero risk of severe outcome, and with vaccines having no transmission impact, there is no rationale for mandates based on individual or community benefit. As note, we have yet to talk about the risks. There are safety concerns with these therapeutics, the full extent of which we're just starting to emerge in this large societal level experiment. Serious mistakes have already occurred, noted by the marked rise in myocarditis in young males. So it's currently sitting at about 1 in 1,700 for the Moderna vaccine. And I want you to realize that this is permanent injury that will follow these youths into the future with unknown consequences. One must also, I should point out, consider the potential community level risks. And one of the ones that we're actually talking about right now is called original antigenic sin. I will spare the details, but it's a process by which we turn a portion of the vaccinated into super spreaders. And as one of your employees noted, we're seeing a very marked rise in the number of cases in the population. And indeed, this might be one of the side effects or consequences of original antigenic sin. So in summary then, when we look at the 5 to 11 age range, there is no significant individual or community benefit to vaccination, while there is an individual and community level risk. I want you to use this knowledge to inform your policy decisions on childhood and youth participation in recreational activities. So the last part of my presentation will be a little bit more direct, and I'm going to be somewhat clear in my thoughts. Our children during this epidemic response have been treated in an appalling manner. This is the result of a public health campaign that is evidence-free and driven by fear and panic. The mistakes are numerous. The most dramatic you're seeing right now is the generation of what we call mass psychosis, which is driving destructive irrationality in our culture. Just witness the current display of healthy, symptomless people queuing for rapid antigen tests in response to a variant whose virulence, according to all known data, is akin to a common cold. And the data I'm talking about is from population level statistics right down to the subatomic level where we look at the three-dimensional structure of the virus. So what I really want to say to you today is the mania that you're seeing really does need to stop. And you as decision makers can take concrete action in that regard by rejecting irrational vaccine mandates on children and youth. And I really do believe it's time for you to take the lead for your community and for this province. So I appreciate the time is short and there is decidedly more nuance to the arguments presented above. And in this regard, I'd like to extend an open invitation to all of you to discuss this topic in greater detail. I'm available anytime that fits your schedule, and I'd like to thank you finally for your time and consideration. Thank you.
And the council is reminding me that I have become the person who was on mute that every meeting has to have. And anyway, Dr. Welsh, thank you very much for your time and your information. We do receive a lot of advice from medical doctors and other experts. And as you will appreciate, it's not all the same. But thank you very much for your time tonight. Madam Clerk, I think that's the end of the registered delegations. And Council, we need a motion to receive the information from the CAO and the public delegations. Would one of you give us that? Councillor Robertson, thank you for that. Is there an objection to the motion? Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you, everybody. Council, it's my pleasure to bring your attention now to the 2021-2022 Oakville Employee United Way campaign update. And the information, you have the report, but we have a delegation from Meredith Burke of the United Way, and Julie Mitchell, the Director of Recreation and Culture, is available as well. Madam Clerk, can we tee up Ms. Burke? She's here somewhere. There she is.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
We hear and see you very well. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Burton and council members. It's really my great honor to join the council meeting this evening on behalf of United Way to acknowledge and celebrate the town of Oakville's employee United Way campaign achievement of raising more than $75,000. Now, this impressive achievement represents so much more than dollars and cents. It represents possibility for real people with real stories, and more often than not, complex ones of managing the impact of this pandemic. And so this contribution will go a long way to take care of our town's most vulnerable residents. So to start, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the town employees and the many team members that are endlessly generous with their time and treasure to support the United Way campaign each year. This year's campaign result is a 15% increase over last year's campaign. And this really exemplifies what a caring organization this is and how all employees are empowered to get involved and give back. I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate and commend the Town Campaign Volunteer Committee with a particular acknowledgement of Julie Mitchell, Janine Ivings, and Jennifer McPetrie for their leadership of the campaign and the committee. These co-chairs led a cross-departmental committee who worked together to build awareness of United Way within the organization and encouraging all employees to participate in the campaign. The campaign kicked off with the launch of a moving video that showcased town employees' motivations for contributing to the campaign, ranging from staff based in town hall, community centers, libraries, Oakville Fire, Oakville Transit, Central Operations, and council members. And the committee also worked to engage employees by hosting fundraising events, either virtually or at a safe distance, such as a golf tournament, a bus pull challenge, and an online auction. And we certainly applaud the creativity to ensure that community needs are met despite the uncertainty and challenges facing them. It was inspiring to see so many employees across all town departments at all levels unite in local love to join the recovery through the campaign. So I want to thank each Town of Oakville team member who selflessly volunteered to contributed to the United Way campaign. This success was made possible by you. I'd also like to acknowledge Councillor Parmar, who is currently volunteering as a campaign cabinet member, not only supporting the campaign here at the Town of Oakville, but also helping to reach out to other local organizations and public institutions to endorse a strong workplace campaign there as well. It goes without saying that this is a critical time in our community's history. This year's campaign is really more important than ever before because it's helping our community's ability to recover and rebuild. This campaign is essential to empower local frontline agencies to continue to respond to the overwhelming needs created by the pandemic. And it's so important to ensure that none of our family, friends, and neighbors are left behind as we move forward into brighter times. We know that the need is higher than ever before. This is a challenging time for all of us, but it doesn't affect everyone equally. I've heard it said this way: we're all in the same storm, but not in the same boat. And that's so true, isn't it? Some of us are riding things out in a sturdy yacht or houseboat, but others are fighting their way in a canoe or a life raft. The storm is the same, but our ability to withstand the waves is not. And the unfortunate truth is that this pandemic hasn't affected everyone equally. Kids, youth, women, those already experiencing poverty and those already facing isolation, like seniors or those with a disability, have felt the effects of COVID-19 much more severely than others. Our community is slowly beginning to open up, and vaccines are providing tremendous hope when it comes to stemming the tide of COVID-19. However, the work to address deepening poverty and the pressing issues at the root is not a quick fix. And I have just a really quick video that shows some of the complex issues our community is currently dealing with. So, Madam Clerk, if you could play video number 1.
I am grateful to be back at work, although now I'm nervous and my anxiety has never been worse.
I'm grateful that I maintained my job, although now I feel exhausted because of the toll it has taken.
I am grateful for the roof over my head, although now I feel drained because my fridge is still empty.
I am grateful for my health, although now I fear my situation is worse and I don't know what to do.
I am grateful to be living here, although now I feel lost because I need so much more help right now.
I am grateful we are slowly getting back to normal, although now I'm worried because I've noticed a change in my daughter.
I am grateful that I can see my family, although now I feel scared to leave my apartment.
I am grateful I can see my friends again, although now I'm scared I've fallen behind.
Some of our neighbors have borne an unfair burden. For some, a new challenge has just begun. Join the recovery.
And so I think that demonstrates some of the complex issues. You know, here in our community, we've seen a 300% increase in distress line calls since the start of the pandemic. In Halton, 1 in 4 secondary students have shown signs of moderate to high levels of anxiety. And we also know that Oakville has the highest poverty rate in all of Halton at 9.7%. Now, I have many stories that I can share with you on how the payroll contributions from this year's campaign are changing lives in our community. From Gabor, a newcomer Canadian who lost his job as a painter, but was connected with a Hungarian-speaking support worker that helped him to connect to government support and new employment opportunities. Or Peggy, a senior living alone, grieving the loss of her husband during the lockdown, who received visits and care packages to help her manage her anxiety. But today I wanted to focus on the impact to our local youth. We're seeing an increase in mental health challenges across all demographics. And the Canadian Pediatric Society has shared, we cannot overstate the extent of the mental health crisis facing youth. McMaster Children's Hospital has also reported seeing a steady increase of youth in crisis since the pandemic began. They're seeing an increase in hospital admissions due to suicide attempts, substance abuse, and eating disorders. Keeping the doors open for local social programs that support our local kids and youth have truly never been more critical. So I'd like to share the story of Caitlin, a local Oakville resident who participates in a local Oakville program that is made possible with United Way funding. So, Madam Clerk, if we can share video number 2.
Hello, my name is Caitlin, and I'm a 16-year-old student in grade 11 at TA Blakelock High School, Oakville. I would not have been able to continue learning music if it wasn't for Art House because my mom is a single parent. She is unable to work because of her disability, so she has to raise my sister and I on her own, and we wouldn't be able to afford all of the lessons and all of the rehearsals needed for music if it wasn't for Art House. Through music, I am able to express myself better. I have difficulties expressing emotions, so I learned that I can find other ways to express my emotions through music. Playing any piece or fooling around with instruments can make me really happy, even when I'm having a bad day.
So this year we've launched a new campaign tagline, Unite in Local Love, Join the Recovery, and I'm so inspired by that message. By coming together in love for our community and those who live in it, we can make Halton and Hamilton even greater places to live, work, and raise our families than they were before the world changed forever. So thank you to everyone who contributed to this year's campaign.
Thank you, Ms. Burke, for sharing that with us. And on behalf of council, thank you to Councillor Pavan Palmer for her selfless volunteering to help lead the campaign. I know we've all heard from her with all the persuasive power she's famous for. Councillor Grant?
There we go, unmuting. Great. I just wanted to note the last video mentioned Art House. And I just wanted to say that Don and Gemma, who run Art House, have helped a number of children get out of their selves, like become better and be people who want to explore their creativity. I've recently posted a video of my daughter on Facebook and on Twitter about her singing, and it would not have been for Art House if she didn't get out of her shell. And so the stuff that we do with United Way to support places like that are fantastic. And I'm so happy that we can do this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. I hope your testimonial will move others. Council, would someone like to move receipt of the report? Councillor Grant, thank you very much. Any objection? There being none, Councillor Grant's motion carries. Now, next, Council, we have the Oakville Enterprises Corporation quarterly update. And Rob Lister, the CEO of Oakville Enterprises, is here. He's provided you with a report, and he has a presentation. And if he's true to form, it's not a particularly long one, but it's usually punchy. Mr. Lister, I see you, and you're unmuted, so I'm going to give you the floor and look forward to your information.
Thank you much, Mr. Mayor. A little bit longer than normal, but I'll talk fast. How's that? So good evening, Mayor Burton and councillors. I'm pleased to be here this evening to provide an update. Also on the call today is David Brennan, Chair of Oakville Enterprises. I always like to start off my presentations referring to our brand behaviors of lead, innovate, and commit to excellence. We have over 2,000 brand ambassadors across Ontario and Western Canada. These employee behaviors are key to our successes with our customers and the sectors we serve. As many of the councillors will remember, I've presented on Leadership Matters and have made reference to it several times. At OEC, we have embraced, propagated, and instilled into our culture our brand behaviors of lead, innovate, and commit to excellence. And it is working. You've heard me say this before. Be better than you were yesterday and better tomorrow than you were today. Be better than you were yesterday and better tomorrow than you were today. Our messages and actions are consistent, and we strive to expand the influence of these messages every day. At OEC, leadership matters. Next slide, please. This evening, I'll share some exciting highlights and updates. As always, it will cover a variety of topics. Next slide, please. To begin, I'd like to share with some fall business highlights. Ontario's continued infrastructure build has resulted in a record volume for locates in 2021, with high growth expected to continue in 2022. We are now 750 locators strong, covering Ontario from Windsor to Toronto to Kenora, and continuing to gain ground in Alberta. In Ontario, we had almost 500,000 locates logged this year. Next slide, please. Due to the windstorm on Saturday, December 11th, we experienced some downed trees and power lines, which led to a few power outages. 16,000 customers were affected at various times. Tree contact caused by high winds triggered the interruptions. The average duration was 82 minutes. The longest duration was 103 minutes. Our crews worked to minimize the impacts of the storm on our customers, keeping the community both connected and safe. And as you can see by this commendation, their efforts were recognized by the community. From the slide, fire trucks were on our street as a large limb came down on a neighbor's power line. A short while later, Oakville Hydro showed up, cut the limb, repaired the wire. Great work in keeping us safe and with power in this nasty weather. They need to know how much their efforts are appreciated. I certainly appreciate receiving this positive feedback. Next slide, please. Here's some photos of the damage sustained during the storm. The first photo shows a leaning tree that needed to be removed in Ward 3 at East Court Road and Elmhurst Avenue. In the second photo, top right, tree made contact with our overhead power lines at Winston Churchill and Lakeshore Road. And the third photo shows a falling tree that caused a secondary momentary outage in Ward 3 at Watson and Shedden Avenue. Next slide, please. Hydro One requested assistance in their power restoration response through the Ontario Mutual Aid Group. Once Oakville Hydro's outage and damage restoration needs were addressed, we were able to send one crew and a bucket truck to assist with the Hydro One repairs. Our crew was dispatched to Minden, Ontario on the morning of December 16th. On arrival, the Oakville Hydro crew was paired up with the Hydro One crew and helped line patrolling, splicing broken wire, and isolating and energizing cable. The debrief from the crew highlighted many downed lines, broken poles, and mass outages. In total, the crew provided 3 days of support to Hydro One, and Hydro One has reported that over 765,000 customers have been without power across the province. The OnMag program provides value support for LDCs experiencing significant power outages, usually as a result of storm and weather-related events. Oakville Hydro is pleased to provide our support into response to the needs of Ontarians. Next slide, please. I'm pleased to share that Oakville Hydro was announced as a utility partner to Surveillant, who received funding from the IESO, the Independent Electricity System Operator, to develop a centralized information platform to exchange and aggregate real-time data. Surveillant is our SCADA system provider, the system that monitors and controls the distribution system. The media announcement was made outside of the Oakville Trafalgar Community Centre, where Mayor Burton hosted delegates from the ISO, the Government of Ontario, Surveillant, Power Consumer, and Peak Power. The project joins other pilot projects across the province to help gain a better understanding about how community-based energy assets can contribute to the reliability and affordability of the province's electricity. In the background of this photo, you can see the mobile battery energy storage system we have just received. It contains 250 kilowatt hours of energy. It can power 250 homes for about an hour. We'll use it for managing voltage issues and some service interruptions, avoiding the use of diesel generators. Next slide, please. Oakville Hydro was also recognized by the Canadian Electricity Association with the President's Award of Excellence for Employee Safety in Distribution. The President's Award recognizes electricity service providers that have achieved the top ranking in total recordable injury frequency amongst their peers of comparable size in generation, transmission, or distribution operations. Next slide, please. I'm very excited to announce that our recently acquired company, DPM Energy, which engineers electrical distribution, has been recertified as one of Canada's most admired corporate cultures, awarded by Waterstone Human Capital. Next slide, please. On National GIS Day, for those that missed it, Geographic Information System Day, employees participated in the virtual 2021 Canadian Common Ground Alliance International Damage Prevention Symposium. Among the topics discussed included a panel presentation on streamlining the locate process, mitigating risk while achieving accuracy and speed. Next slide, please. Sean McCoggan from OEC, Darian Hagan from our joint venture Geosource Energy, our joint partner, and Dave Tanoco from the town of Oakville presented at the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge. During the session, they spoke about geo-exchange systems and the critical role they can play in helping communities achieve low carbon aspirations. The town of Oakville also presented a case study of geo-exchange in action at the Oakville Trafalgar Community Center. This is a photo of the geo-exchange equipment at the community center. Next slide, please. The next two slides will highlight some recent innovations in action. First, the Ontario Energy Board launched its electricity and natural gas utilities service area map as a one-stop shop. The tool, which was developed by our company PlanView, provides users with information about where electricity and natural gas utilities certificates and licenses have been granted all across the province. Next slide, please. Oakville Hydro launched its robotic process automation for the purpose of bill processing. The innovative tool eliminates an average of 30 minutes per day of manual data entry. The robotic process helps enhance bill processing through a water billing variance process and a billing error process. On the water side, high water usage triggers a work order to verify the meter reading and notify the customer of the high water usage. On the hydro side, the robotic process checks for anomalies in the meter to cash process and triggers necessary actions. A brief, next slide, please. Thank you. A brief regulatory update. The COVID-19 Energy Assistance Program was completed. This program included 500 approved residential applications totaling $170,000 on unbilled credits, as well as 125 approved small business applications totaling $100,000 of on-bill credits. The Ontario Energy Board announced no changes to the time of use and tiered rates effective November 1st through to April 30th, 2022 for residential and small business customers. And on November 1st, 2021, the Ontario government decreased the Ontario electricity rebate from 18.9% to 17%. The rebate is a pre-tax credit that appears at the bottom of the electricity bills. And my last slide, please. This concludes my presentation today, Mayor Burton. Have a safe and happy holiday season, and thank you.
Thank you, President Lister. Council, do you have questions? Councillor Hazlitt-Deal.
Thank you for the presentation. It's always very enlightening. And a special thanks for all the extra work in Ward 3 through that windstorm. I'm glad you appreciated the positive feedback you got. Coincidentally, I did get a question from a residents association asking about how Hydro evaluates or their process for assessing the reliability of the grid. A question came from the Clearview area, but I've also had it in the past from the Southeast. So is it something you could share with us in the future or direct us to get information for them around how you're ensuring that the grid is better today and better tomorrow, as you appropriately said earlier?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that question, Councillor. We certainly can provide lots of information. There are different reliability measures that are industry standards, the average interruption frequency, the average interruption duration. We can do that by area. We look at worst performing feeders. We look at our response times. There's a number of different measures that are used for us to make sure that we're focusing on the right areas, but also for us to benchmark against other organizations to make sure that we are, we try to be ahead of other organizations when it comes to system reliability in Oakville. So I'm very happy to bring that forward at another opportunity.
Perfect. And is there, could you include in that investments in the infrastructure improvements across Oakville?
Certainly can. We had actually planned through you, Mr. Mayor, at the next update in March, I think we're scheduled to provide some information on our asset management program and our distribution system plan that we submit to the Ontario Energy Board that spells out how we approach investment in the distribution system over the next number of years. So I'd be very pleased to be able to do that.
Thanks very much, Rob.
Yes, Mr. Lister, I think Council might be very appreciative to learn the role the Energy Board plays in all of that. So that'd be a very good educational session for us, and I'd be pleased to schedule that at your convenience. Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Lister, thank you very much for being here this evening. You mentioned the power outage on Saturday, and we had another one again on Sunday. Was it the average time was 103 minutes on the Saturday?
I believe I reported that the longest was 103 minutes, and the average was in the 80-minute time frame, I think.
All right, and
something longer?
Yes. Well, I'll follow up with you on that.
Yeah, you follow up with me, please, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the bottom of that.
Coincidentally, we received a note today that the eastern side of Ward 3 and the eastern side of Ward 6, that town forestry will be assisting in cutting back along the lines again, starting in January. And I know that's done on a rotational basis. We have new standards that have been put in place as a result of our changing climate, resulting, I guess, after the ice storm, 2013 possibly, that calls for a larger cutback, if you will, to protect your infrastructure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there have not been changes in the standards over the last, I'll say, 20 years. There's been a more assertive effort to try to keep to the standards. The actual standards for high voltage is approaching 10 feet. And we have a number of situations where we're not at that point. That would affect a lot of very large trees. However, we are striving to, when we do our tree trimming, to get to that standard, and also to such that we won't have to go back until we're scheduled to go back on the cycle.
So the message to our residents is remember power outages. And from the pictures you showed, it appears that most of them are caused by tree limbs that are coming down on the infrastructure. And so the trimming process allows for better chance of uninterrupted electricity?
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor. I absolutely appreciate all councilors' support in getting that message out, because when it's windy and especially as the trees get older and taller, the root base is less able to support the large trees, and then the branches also falling on the lines, which it can be dangerous. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Good stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings, for an illuminating question and answer from Mr. Lister. Councillor Grant.
Sorry, just quickly, there are some people in the community who believe that burying the lines would be a better way of solving problems that we have when it comes to lines falling down. I just wonder if you can comment on the fact that that might not be financially reasonable and possibly not reasonable overall.
Yes, thank you for that question, Councillor, through you, Mr. Mayor. That is a question that comes up quite often, and it is about 10 times more expensive to put lines underground as it is putting them overhead, depending on whether it's a greenfield or an existing situation. And the way that the Ontario Energy Board rules work, and our affordability, if there's a need for lines to go underground, the funding has to come from somewhere else other than Oakville Hydro, because underground is usually typically in a very specific area, and our costing is socialized across the entire customer base. So that's kind of how it works.
I so appreciate that answer, because I try and tell people about that, and it becomes difficult to make people understand that we can't just bury lines all across the town. It's too expensive. So thank you for reminding us of all of that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Is there a motion to receive the information? Councillor Elgar, thank you for that. Quick reflexes there. Any objection? There being none, Councillor Elgar's motion carries. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Mr. Lister.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bye now.
Council, the next item is the Oakville Municipal Development Corporation, AGM, appointment of auditors, directors, and approval of financial statements, all of which you have been given in written form. Nancy Sully, Commissioner of Corporate Services, is available if you have questions. And if you have no questions, I'll take a motion. Councillor Knoll, thank you. Any objection to Councillor Knoll's motion? Councillor Knoll, your motion carries. Thank you. On item 10.5, we have the 2021 financial results. There's a presentation if you require it, and Jonathan Vanderheiden, the Director of Finance and Deputy Treasurer, is available for your questions. It's a fairly pleasant story, so if you have questions, please ask them now. Otherwise, I'll take a motion. Councillor Dudek has a motion. Any objection to Councillor Dudek's motion as listed in the agenda? Seeing none, Councillor Dudek, your motion carries. Mr. Vanderheiden, thank you very much for being available. The next item is a minor matter, another amendment to the sign bylaw. There's no presentation, but staff are available. I think the report explains it perfectly well. If there are no questions, I'll take a motion. There's a delegation not listed here for me. Oh, it's like, thanks to the color, practically blacked out. There is a delegation, and it is a delegation in support by Russell Cheeseman. Let me see if there's a motion first. Is there a motion to pass it? There is, and the motion is from Councillor Giddings. I'm going to now turn to the delegation unless any member of council wants to do something else first. All right. Madam Clerk, would you please do what you have to do to admit the delegation?
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. I'm here in support of the matter that's before you tonight. I was here about a month ago on the original amendment to the sign bylaw. There were some complications that occurred afterwards, and a permit that was applied for and not issued, even though we thought we'd overcome that obstacle the first time around. So I'm just here to ensure that this matter goes through and that I can take 2022 off with respect to the Oakville sign bylaw, and we can get a permit up and a sign erected as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Cheeseman, for your delegation. Let me see if you're going to be accommodated. Is there any objection to the motion by Councillor Giddings? There being none, it carries. And let's hope that we're twice lucky, Mr. Cheeseman. And
thank you. And Merry Christmas to everyone in Council. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Council, we have two confidential discussion items. I believe they're straightforward, and as you know, you have a preference to record as little time as possible in camera. So let me see if there's a motion for the two confidential items. Councillor Adams, thank you. Is there an objection? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, those items are approved. We have no advisory. 10.7. Oh, yeah. We're backing up now. Council, at 10.7, I skipped over the Brownfield Community Improvement Grant. I beg your pardon, plan application, and there's an environmental study grant. We have staff available if you have questions. The motion is to approve to a maximum of $20,000 the study. Is there a mover for this? Councillor Robertson, thank you. Is there an objection? There being none, Councillor Robertson's motion carries. The next one is the retention of external legal counsel by the town and a discussion of alternative fee arrangements. And the motion is that the legal department adopt alternative fee arrangements, AFAs, in retaining external legal counsel where such arrangements achieve the most effective and value-based engagement of external legal counsel best suited for the required legal work. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor Knoll, thank you. Any objection? There being none, Councillor Knoll, your motion carries. The 11s have already carried. There are no advisory committee minutes. And it's actually appropriate now to look for a motion to rise and report. Councillor Grant, thank you for that. Any objection? There being none, Councillor Grant, your motion, which is very welcome, carries. I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent item 8.1 and 8.2, confidential consent item 9.1, discussion items 10.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, and 8, and confidential discussion items 11.1 and 0.2 as noted by the clerk. A mover and seconder for the report would be in order now. Councillor Longo and Councillor Elgar, thank you very much. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the report is adopted. Now, your information items have been circulated electronically, and you have your status of outstanding issues. And under new business, we have a notice of motion, which it's the intention of myself, the mover, and the seconder, that we're only giving notice, and we'll take this matter up in January, rather than waive the procedure bylaw and deal with it tonight. And I can advise that I'm in discussions with the heads of council of the rest of Halton on a coordinated and let's call it group response to this civil liberty emergency. And I hope that everybody is good with that. Thank you. Now, I think under our rules, the delegate would be better to come back in January when we consider the matter. Under other new business, I'm aware that this is, as I said at the start of the meeting, this is the last meeting of the year, and I dubbed it the Christmas week meeting. Does anyone have any new business to bring? Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. I have two matters of new business to bring before Council tonight. First of all, I want to, this actually probably falls under regional reports, but I will do it in an omnibus update. I want to congratulate our colleague and friend, Councillor Pavan Parmar, for her appointment recently on December 9th to the Halton Regional Police Service Board. We are very pleased to welcome Pavan to our board, and she was able to be sworn in and attend her first meeting within, I think it was a few hours almost. So we want to say congratulations to her for her victory and for having expressed that interest and being a great representative for Oakville, another one on the Halton Police Board. So congratulations, Pav. The second thing I just wanted to point out, last time we met, I made a big deal about my backdrop, and that was the Christmas House on McCraney, which is raising funds for two local charities. And tonight I'm highlighting Magic on Munns. This is at the corner of 6th Line and Munns. This is a house that's decorated every year in different themes. This year it's one of my favorite themes, Disney, but Jason, who is the owner of the home and the ultimate Christmas funmeister, has put this display together, and I hope that everybody in town gets a chance to drop by. It's good, safe outdoor activity for families. Come and visit. It's at the corner of Munns and 6th Line in beautiful Ward 5. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Grant.
And following on that, yeah, again, McCraney Street West, if you come along, and if you go to Munns and 6th Line, Ward 5 remains to be the place that you want to go to if you want to see wonderful Christmas displays. So thank you so much for Jeff to bring it up. And also thank you for the people who do this. They make sure that we get great money back in the community. And that's kind of the spirit that we all have in Ward 5.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Yeah, Christmas is a pretty wonderful time of year. And since this is, in a way, well, because it's the last council meeting of the year, I'm going to volunteer my #1 New Year's resolution for you,
We
Council.
do have Wednesday too, though.
That's planning and development, and we have this story that we tell that this is council and that's planning and development. So, you know, and that's the way it was before I got here. I didn't come here to change that. So I'm rolling with the main story that was here when I got here. Anyway, my New Year's resolution is, I've had feedback from members of council who are not on regional council that they've come to realize that they need to have a better picture of what the region is doing faster than when it's too late to say anything. And I appreciate that. And I think it would make us stronger as a local council if this section of the agenda that's called Regional Reports and Question Period became a more active session. And so my New Year's resolution is to populate that with an update at every council meeting, you know, the full Magilla council meeting, with a regional report on not only what has transpired at the regional council, but also a look ahead at what I know to be percolating along in the pipeline there. And I hope that that'll assist not only the members of council who are not on the regional council, but also our residents and our residents associations. So I hope you'll look forward to that. And with that, I'll ask if there are any, Councillor Grant, did you have something else? Okay. I'll ask if there are any requests for reports. I'm not aware of any. And not seeing any, I'll ask if we could have a mover and seconder for the bylaws. Councillor Longo and Councillor Grant, you guys had the fast reflexes on that one. Is there any objection to the bylaws as listed in the agenda? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, the bylaws are adopted. And that ends our work at council for the year. We have a special Planning and Development Council meeting on, I believe it's Wednesday, Madam Clerk. And I hope to see at least a quorum of you there for that. But in the guise of this is the last council meeting of the year, I want to wish each and every one of you and every resident the merriest of Christmases and the happiest of New Year's and the most pleasurable holidays, whatever you celebrate. And with that, that ends our meeting. It's terrific working with you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.